Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back again with another chess video. This time we are looking at a game between Grandmaster Michael Adams from England and Magnus Carlsen's sometimes second in command of his preparation. That's Peter Heine Nielsen. And this game took place at the World Cup in 2011. Want to remind everybody once again, ChessAudiobooks is on chess.com, Lead Chess, Instagram, and Twitter. So please follow me on those platforms. Consider subscribing. Please like the video, get in the comment section, and also check the links below and consider supporting this channel. So Adam started out with E4. Peter started out with C5, Sicilian, knight of 3, D6. And now knight c3, a little bit offbeat, but transposes soon enough into normal lines here. So after d6, usually you'll see d4, of course, but knight c3 was played here, knight f6, and now d4. C takes d4, and queen takes d4 instead of the traditional knight takes d4. And normally you'll see this move, queen takes d4, in the so-called checkover variation after d4 right away. C takes d4, queen takes d4, and it leaves the knight. Leaving the knight here gives white the option of playing this Marazzi bind type setup in the center. Notice that with queen takes d4, the pawn is protected on e4. So for example, after the normal move knight takes d4, you can see the e pawn is not protected, and therefore the lines run knight f6, knight c3, etc. But in the checkover variation, queen takes d4, the e pawn is protected. So after a move like knight f6, white could just play c4 if he wanted to and go into a Marazzi bind type situation. And after, say, knight c6, you have the quick bishop b5 and trading off the knight. And the game takes on a positional nature that you'll see in other variations. For instance, the accelerated dragon, Marazzi bind variations, where you had this slow positional squeeze by white. So Adams plays knight c3 first, canceling that opportunity for c4, and plays queen takes d4, but adopts a similar idea, knight c6, bishop b5, and he parts with his light squared bishop right away. For those of you who don't know, Michael Adams is more of a positional player. We would place him in the category with Vladimir Kramnik, those style of players, Karpov, etc. Right? Not really known for great tactical complications. Of course, all grandmasters can play in that manner if they wanted to, but his preference is to play in the more logical, positional manner. And his games are great to learn from because of the clarity of thought in the positions. He's a pretty straightforward player, sort of like a Fischer type, right? He's not a wild player. He's not a Tal. Right, he's not gonna be, dropping knights, on f6 often, and throwing the kitchen sink at the opponent. All right, he's more in that positional line of player. So bishop g5, e6, queen d3. All right, getting the queen out of the way, preparing queenside castle, and also bishop e7, and now knight d4. So you can see the reason for moving the queen out of the way, so that the knight can now come to the center here. D4 castles, queenside, rook c8, f4, and queen a5. So you can see typical Sicilian counterplay from Peter Heine Nielsen. King b1, rook fd8. So both sides are pretty much fully developed. So let the games begin. Let the opposite wing attacks begin. And This is what draws so many people to the Sicilian, especially as black, is the counter attacking possibilities. I don't think there's any other opening in chess that you can play as black that will give you as many chances to win as does the Sicilian defense. It really is an awesome opening. I wish I played it often when I first started playing chess. For some reason, I was this e4, e5 player. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but later on, I began to appreciate the counter attacking opportunities in the Sicilian from move one, as opposed to kind of playing, say, like in the Roy Lopez, where you're like waiting and waiting and for your opportunities. The Sicilian, you get chances to fight back early on, typically. You can see that here with this opposite wing attack already forming, as you have the counterplay down the C file, semi-open C file, pawns ready to move from A6 to B5, and play is straightforward. All right, white is going to attack on the king side, and in these opposite castling situations, what matters is not so much material, but it's more of who can gain and keep the initiative. Usually, the initiative is going to be the deciding factor, who holds it and is able to, basically get more free moves in on their opponent. It's not going to be who has extra pawn or who has the exchange. Game continued, G4. So, again, Sicilian is not for the faint of heart, is it? Look at white's attack building up. All right, that can be quite uncomfortable for some people and would turn them off from playing the Sicilian, to be under this kind of pressure 14 moves into the game. Bishop E8. All right, so bring the bishop back on defensive duty, just for now, but also clearing the C file for, so that the rook can be activated. Bishop E8, F5, and already white is threatening here, with the simple F takes E6, F takes E6, and knight takes E6. Bishop D7 now. Rook HG1 from Adams. Again, he would love for Peter Nielsen just to take so that the G file will be opened up. Can't do that, can we? Queen A6, offering the trade of queens. And Adams turns this opportunity down here. All right. With the move Queen F3. Other ideas of bishop H4 here. Of course, queen takes, rook takes, A6, G5. And white will have a slight advantage, but black, can hang around for a long time after the queens come off the board. So Michael Adams goes for queen F3, rook C4, bishop to C1, and now E5. This is always an important decision for black, because once he makes the move E5, there's really no turning back, especially as the D5 square becomes weak and vulnerable. So black has to really be sure of himself when he makes this move, but he feels it's time to launch his counterattack, so he goes for it. So E5, G5 from Adams here. And now Peter Heine Nielsen makes a very important and critical decision that is a common theme in the Sicilian, and that's that exchange sacrifice on C3. Rook takes C3. He can't afford just to, hop his knight back to E8, right? White's pawns are already past the borderline in black's position on the king side. White is ready to play F6. White is ready to play G6, even sacrifice pawns to open the lines. So white is putting a lot of pressure on black, and black must play actively here. Black can't just afford to play a move like knight E8, for example. In whoops, sorry about that, guys. Let's go back here. Black can't afford to, play this kind of move, knight E8 in the position, for instance. You see, moves like knight D5, for example, and you can see bishop is hanging right there. And notice how white is able to just leave his knight there on d4. And let's say black is passive and plays bishop f8. You see how the attack just keeps rolling and rolling along here. And of course, if black takes, the lines open. Do I have to keep going to show you? You know, the lines open up, and this is all going to be winning for white. You know, f takes e6, right? And of course, you got this coming. So of course, you play that, right? Bishop takes e6. What's wrong with taking the pawn? Well, you can already see with the rook on g1, queen on f3, right? Why not bring the other rook in the game here? You're threatening here, and then you could get the point. Is that this is not the time for any backtracking for black here. And that's why I said it's very important. Once you play a move like e5 here, you have to be sure. Right? So after e5, g5, Nielsen sensed that this is the moment in the position. Right? 19 moves in is already a critical moment in the position. He plays rook takes c3. All right? Now Adams has a choice. He can play queen takes c3, or he can play b takes c3. All right? Both are decent moves, right? There's nothing wrong per se with playing queen to c3 as played in the game, and this kind of marks Adam's style. A player, say like I think like a Kasparov or even Magnus Carlsen might have went for b takes c3, so that the queen can stay next to the pawn on e4. So play could go, for example, b takes c3. Let's say e takes d4, g takes f6, bishop takes f6, c takes d4. Let's say bishop a4, starting to attack the c2 pawn. Bishop b2, queen c6, queen g2, protecting the c2 pawn, of course. Rook c8, protecting the c2 pawn again with rook d2, queen b5, queen e2, queen b6, and queen d3. All right, and I think white is okay here, if not, not a little better. I like white's pawn preponderance in the center, and it seems like all of black's attacking schemes have been effectively squashed. And hey, white is up the exchange, so it's the onus is on black to prove that compensation ultimately. And I think here in the long run, white should be able to turn this position around, because I think if the game will go on like this from this position, that black's attacking chances would gradually diminish, while white would steadily improve his position, especially by advancing that pawn preponderance in the center, and he would eventually create a passed pawn. And again, being up the exchange, I just think that he will probably go on and end up winning from this position. So in my opinion, I think b takes c3 is better, keeping the eye on the e4 pawn. However, Adams' style again is more positional, and that just probably just looked too ugly for him, right? He probably just didn't like opening up his king side, his queen side with the king exposed there, semi-open c-file, right? It's just not his type of position, right? Not what he was looking for, especially after playing 5 queen takes d4. So he plays queen takes c3, and after knight takes e4, he gives up that pawn, queen f3, and he's okay with that. He say, okay, I still have my queen side pawns intact, and I still have the attack on the king side, and this is what he's banking on. He's like, hey, I'm back, queen f3, I'm attacking the knight, and I'm still gonna push f6 or g6, what have you. I'm still gonna have my attack. d5. So we have to ask the question here, what is black getting for the exchange? Well, black has this beautiful center, and he has the knight on e4. This is what black is getting for the exchange. He's driving the white pieces out of the center, and he has those two beautiful connected pawns on the D and E files. All right. Right now, with the position closed for the most part, those rooks are not going to be able to play a factor at this moment. The rooks need open files, just like bishops need open diagonals. So at this point, the knights, the minor pieces, are more valuable than the rooks at this moment. I would even argue to say that even in this position right now, the best piece on the board is that knight on e4. Game continued. Knight b3. So a little defensive maneuvering from Michael Adams. And now queen c6. Okay. And now with the queen here unprotected on f3, Adams has to be careful for moves like e4, for example, and then moves like knight f3, for example, afterward, picking up the queen. Of course, being a strong master, he's not going to fall for that, but these are ideas that are in the position that I want to point out to you. So here Adams plays h4. Another move he could have played right away is f6. Of course, black cannot afford to take here. He would have to play something like this: bishop b4, a3, bishop d6, or something like that. F takes g7, rook c8 with typical Sicilian counterplay. All right, scary looking position, but you get that in the Sicilian. And again, if you're a Sicilian player, you already know that sometimes you have to walk the tightrope. This is just a sample line, but f6 is definitely a move that can be played, and I would lean toward playing a move like that right away, right? Because I know that in these opposite wing attacks, it's important to have the initiative, and it's important to get your attack in first. But Adams probably felt like, hey, there's no immediate threat from black, so I have more time to build up. Because look how far advanced the white pawns are already, and look at black's queen side pawns. So nothing is even close to white's queen side at this moment. So I think he might have underestimated black's chances for a second there. So h4 was played, and now g6. So f6 is played, bishop f8. And so the position becomes a little bogged down for white over on the queen side, like on the king side. Yes, he could play h5, but that it takes time. So I think black gets a little breather here for a second. And now knight d2. Of course, white wants to get rid of that strong knight on e4. Knight d6. And now knight f1. And, oops, sorry guys. Knight f1 was played, and there's the threat against this pawn. You see the rook on d1 and queen here on f3 attacking this pawn. Better move though is c3. c3 is a better move, already putting defensive measures in place. Because after knight f1, Peter Nielsen plays bishop f5, and now there's a pin here. So now the king can't just move away. See, after c3, bishop f5, the king could just go in the corner. But now this pawn has to kind of be watched now by pieces. Bishop b5 is played. And now queen b3 to protect the pawn. Some of you that are not that strong tactically are wondering why you can't just play knight to e3 here and just attack the bishop while simultaneously protecting the pawn. And this is the reason right here. Bishop e4 is a very strong move, hitting the queen, right? And remember, it's about the initiative. So now that you gave a free move to black, puts white up against the ropes here. And then white is, of course, totally on the defensive, right? You could, play, keep defending the pawn on c2, but then it just opens up other opportunities for black, such as knight b5, right? For example, d4, and then black is basically taking over the game. Matter of fact, knight b5 looks really strong. But I just wanted to give you a quick example of why you can't play knight e3 there. So Adams plays queen b3, and this is a bad sign in a position where you have to start reacting to your opponent's threats. Another bad sign is that he has to use a high-ranking piece to defend the queen side. And of course, he wants to keep an eye on this pawn at the same time. So he's trying to play in that Lasker style of not making it purely defensive move, but also having some attacking possibilities. So he moves the queen so that he can defend and still have his eye on this d5 pawn. Now from here, Nielsen has some pretty strong moves here. He plays knight c4. Now the idea in this position is to behind this move is to play the move e4. What does e4 do? E4 covers the c3 square, so that the queen can't use it as a defensive haven to block the action of black's queen, right? So the idea is to play e4 and then play knight to a5, attacking the queen, so that the queen cannot protect this pawn anymore. So that's the basic idea behind that. Let me show you a couple of other options black had. So after queen b3, knight e4 is also possible. And the idea again with this move though is d4, although for different reasons. So I'll just give black another move so you can see. And this is really people how you understand chess is by going through different variations and understanding the plans behind the moves. You're not just one move threats. So for instance here, if black played the move knight e4, the idea is similar with the d4 advance, but the idea here is to bring the bishop back to e6, attacking the queen. And also a2. And I know I have a lot of arrows here, but the red arrow on the queen is just indicating, I set this up to indicate that if you look at the position, the queen has no good squares to go to. After bishop e6, that is. Right? a3 is covered. I'm put some more arrows. a3 is covered by this bishop. After bishop e6, After bishop e6, the queen on b3 will be attacked. Remember, d4 covers the c3 square and the e3 square. If the queen comes to f3, the queen would drop after knight c3 check, right? Because the queen would be hanging. The knight is covering g3 now, and the bishop is also covering h3. So there's no good square for the queen to go. The only good square for the queen to go is to d3, but it runs into a fork on f2. You see? And that's why I have those arrows highlighted from the knight on e4 to f2. So that's the explanation of that move. That's the idea behind knight e4. The final option that black has here also is knight b5. The idea behind this is more straightforward. This is just to play rook c8. Again, I'll give black another move. It's just to play rook c8 and putting more pressure on the, basically just moving the knight out of the way and putting more pressure on the c3 pawn, c2 pawn rather. Alright, and then possibly playing a move like knight d4 at some point. Alright, so let's get back to the game. So those are some good options for black. And that's the sign of a good position when you have several good moves to choose from. So Peter chose knight c4. It was an excellent move. Rook g2, protecting the pawn. So Of course, Adam sees what's going on, protecting the pawn. So Nielsen's going through with this plan anyway. D4. And notice how, again, the initiative. D4 not only cuts off the C3 square as we spoke about, but the rook is now attacked on G2. So white must take time and play a defensive move here. Remember, white, if he had his way, would love to just overrun black on the king side. What happened to that? You see how all of that is stopped? Because now black has taken the initiative and white must react to all of black's threatening maneuvers. Rook F2. Bishop E6. More threatening maneuvers. And this, my friend, is how we use the initiative. Now the queen has to get out of the way because of the discovered check possibilities. So queen G3. E4. And now we see one of the reasons why black played that rook, the exchange sacrifice on C3. Right? That rolling pawn center. And this is Sicilian defense 101. This is like a model game in the Sicilian. If you wanted to know how to play the Sicilian, this is a game you could show somebody. This is model Sicilian play. Black with the two bishops, right? Pawns rolling in the center. Pieces ready to attack. Again, notice how useless white's rooks are with this semi-closed position. H5, of course, white is going to try to continue his attack, but now it's too late. And it's very hard. Another thing that I want to say, is very hard to attack on the flank, right? On the sides of the board when your opponent is dominating in the center like that. And look at black's position. That flank attack is going nowhere. Watch what happens. In response to H5, guess what Peter Heine Nielsen plays? He just plays E3. Again, assaulting the rook. This is harassment. Rook is being assaulted again. Rook H2. Again, you got to try, right? Open up, play H takes G6 and put the queen on H4 and checkmate. However, the initiative is in the hands of black and he plans to keep it that way, and he plays a very strong move. Knight A3 check. And now it's forced upon white to open his king side. So it's interesting that earlier Adams played queen takes C3 to keep his queen side pawns pristine and closed in front of his king. And now near the end he's forced to open his the gates to his castle. B takes A3. I mean, do you need to see why? If king A1 is played, there's a problem on C2. You see, knight takes C2, and then of course white would have to give back the exchange, but with a drastically worse position. Okay, pawns in the center. I mean, black is totally winning and white is totally lost. Another idea, if he played knight takes C2 here, and then he decides, hey, I don't want to play rook takes C2. This king B1, and again a forced situation where the king is forced out of his home, out of his happy home, and then now checkmate is 9 again. He's just gonna be forced to give up more material after rook takes the check, and you can see the rook hanging on D1. This is gonna fall. So I know most of you didn't need to see that, but like I said, some of us like to see the brutality. So I have to show for the fans of war out there. So B takes A3 is forced. Queen C4. And now you can see this long diagonal open for the bishops. Checkmate is threatened. So desperate move by Adams just to create some room for the king. Right? If he tries to play C3, just simply E2 here, forking both the rook and the pawn. Okay, but more so than that, it cuts off the action of this defender along the second rank, and that opens up this move again. Because after all, this is the reason why white will try to play c3 here, is to defend the a2 pawn with his rook, but then just simply e2. However, in the game, Michael Adams just played bishop takes e3, which was meant by queen takes a2, king c1, and then d takes e3, which cut off the escape from the escape here for the king. And so now the simple queen a1 checkmate is threatened. And now the problem is white just doesn't have enough time to deal with the threats here, because the rook is also cutting off the king on the d file. So for example, if rook takes, then queen a1 mate, because this pawn here covering this square. If queen takes e3, it's mate again, because the rook is covering the d file. So unfortunately for Adams, there are two pieces covering the d file, and therefore the king can escape, and Adams was forced to resign. Also cool to mention is how this bishop is here right next to the king, so even if rook takes d8 is played, there's no check, so black can just go on and mate. So anyway, I hope you guys like that game. Really nice attacking game by Peter Heine Nielsen. Please get in the comment section below. Please subscribe. If you do nothing else, hit that thumbs up button. Please check the links below. I will always put material down there related to the video you just saw, and please consider supporting my channel. And remember, again, Chess Audiobooks is on Instagram, Twitter, Lee Chess, and chess.com. Yeah, let me know what you think about that game, and let me know if you enjoyed these games. I know these aren't like the top players currently, but I just like showing great chess games, especially from chess players that are like kind of obscure, maybe not at the top levels, but nevertheless very good chess players. I like sharing their chess also. I don't always want to show games, just like from the top 10 players. There's many good chess players all over the planet, and and there's games like these that you'll never see, unless somebody shows you, the game. So these are the type of games I like to pick out and share with you. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys soon on the next video.